Hi, Dan here. Hope you're doing really well. I got a question about intervals and why they're called, what they're called, and how to use them. So I'm just going to quickly show you a really easy and good way to learn them, and that's by first knowing two scales that I really recommend that you do know completely off by heart, and that's the major scale and the natural minor scale. I'm going to do this on E, 7th fret A string, so E major. And then you've got E natural minor. So let me explain something very basic. The very first note is called the root note. Think roots of a tree. That's the lowest point of a tree. So the lowest point of the scale is called the root note. And an interval is measured from that note. And all an interval is the distance between two musical notes. And this is an easy way of doing it. What you do is you just number the notes of a scale from 1 to 8 like this. Now the 1 to the 8 has a special name, the octave. Oct means 8. So you may already know that one. It's the same name. The first note's E, the second note's E, and there's a nice little pattern. There's a pattern between all these notes of these different intervals, and you really should learn them. Learn the pattern and learn the sound. So octave is a very good one to start with. You'll notice that certain intervals are shared within these two scales I'm showing you. So the E major scale and the E natural minor scale both have the same octave. In fact, many notes are the same, but some aren't. And this is what makes different scales sound different. And different scales give you lots of different styles of music and chords and triads and arpeggios, which is why it's important to know. So the second note of a major scale, it's called a major second. Any major interval, any interval that's got major, the word major in front of it, can be turned into a minor interval by just going this way, down 1 fret or semitone or half step. So we've got a major second. The third note, see what I'm doing here? Just numbering it as we go, 1, 2, 3. So third note is third, except it's a major third. So remember this by thinking that it's the third note of a major scale. So it's called the major third. Quickly switch over to the natural minor scale. If I go to the third note of that scale, you will see and you'll hear that it's not the same as the major, the third note in the major scale. But they are both thirds. And this is why you can't really just say third, because is it a major third or is it a minor third? So this is where you start to get a bit more specific about the full name of the interval. So this is how you remember it. The major third is the third note in a major scale. The minor third is the third note in a minor scale, which you can also play on the next string. So that's how you're going to be specific. Obviously, to know this, you have to know the major scale very well and the natural minor scale very well, and I recommend you do that. So the fourth note, it's on the same fret as the root note, just on the next string. That's called a perfect fourth. The fourth and the fifth are called perfect intervals in these two scales, and it's shared in both of those scales, same place. Has the same sound. Fifth is the same thing. So if you play the root and the fifth together, you get a power chord. Stanley Clarke used to strum those a lot. It's the same in the major and the natural minor. So the sixth note of the major scale also differs by 1 fret to the minor. I'll put a PDF here that you can download so that you can memorize those scales, get your bass out and see what I'm explaining to you in your own time. But you can see here. The major sixth and a minor sixth are separated by 1 fret. So the distance between the root and the sixth note is a major sixth. That's how you'd say it. And in a natural minor, okay, major sixth, minor sixth. And then finally we have a major seventh, the seventh note in the major scale, and natural minor, seventh note in that. know that it's a natural minor because it's on the same fret as the root note, just 2 strings away. I look at patterns very visually. I also know the sound of it, and that's very important to do as well. But the major 7th is right next to the octave, if you like. There's the octave, there's the major 7th, there's the minor 7th. Now if I play a major scale like this, the major intervals within it, if you remember, discarding the second for a minute, is the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th. So major 3rd, major 6th, major 7th. Those 3 notes are the difference between the major scale and the natural minor scale. I'll show you. When I get to, in this pattern, when I get to the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th, I'm just going to put it down a fret. Keep all the other notes the same, you've got a natural minor scale. So that really is the difference between those 2 scales. And by knowing the scale and by knowing the name of the interval with it, realizing a few of them are the same, the 4th, the 5th, and the octave are the same, and the major 2nd, sorry. But the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th are different by 1 fret. You've got the major interval and you've got the minor interval. You start to understand how similar scales are, and also how the change of 1 interval can make a huge difference. I'll demonstrate that now. Don't worry if some of this has gone over your head a bit. I'll put the link to the blog post that I'll put with the names of the intervals so you can actually memorize this stuff. But let's say I've got a major scale. And I now start to talk in terms of intervals. So if you play a major scale but replace the major 7th with a minor 7th, so that means just putting it down 1 fret, you get a Mixolydian mode. Good way of practicing. That's probably why I did the lesson in E, because you can have a drone on your E string and just play around with that. I've also got some drones in different keys for free that I'll put a link to that as well, so you can practice this in different keys. That's a good way of listening to the sound that a different interval creates. Have a drone. It's a perfect 5th. And just move around different scales in that way. So that was called a Mixolydian mode. If you flatten the 3rd, so make it major 3rd to minor 3rd, and keep everything else the same, we get a Dorian mode. And once you know the intervals within any particular scale, you can start to play chords as well. I'm just playing the root, the minor 3rd, and the minor 7th. Creates a minor 7th chord. There's a major 6th there. The Dorian mode happens to look exactly the same as the natural minor, except instead of a minor 6th, it's a major 6th. Now, I know this because I've worked hard over the years to learn these different scales. So if this is a bit new to you, don't worry. I wouldn't expect you to know all those different modes that I'm talking about. But I do suggest that you learn the major scale off by heart, the natural minor scale off by heart, realize that actually those 2 scales are related, and then you can get onto modes and other kind of modes and scales at a later date. But once you know intervals, when musicians talk in terms of intervals, they do, don't they, a lot, in minor seconds, major seconds, all that kind of thing, then you actually know what the lingo is. For example, if you play a natural minor scale with a minor second, you get this. So there's a major second, flatten it, go down 1 fret. You get a Phrygian mode. Quite easy to learn if you know the natural minor scale, and that you know what a minor second is, just a major second down a fret. A perfect 5th, the one that's the 5th note of the scale, that can be augmented or diminished. When you augment something, you raise it. When you diminish something, you lower it. So an augmented 5th is when you go up 1 fret, and a flat 5 or a diminished 5th is the other way. Now this gets a bit weird because that flat 5 is also a sharp 4, and that I think can confuse a lot of people. it's two names for the same thing. Why is that? Let me quickly demonstrate that. I'm going to play, don't worry if you don't know the scale that I'm playing, I'll just bear with me. I'm going to play an E Lydian, which looks like a major scale with a sharp 4. And the reason it's a sharp 4 is if we go from the beginning and count up, that funny note we hit is number 4 in the sequence, okay? But it's not a perfect fourth, it's 1 fret higher. So that's why you know it's a sharpened fourth. It's not a fifth because there is a fifth note in the scale and it's a perfect fifth. But if I start from the same root and I now do a Locrian mode and count up from number 1, that note is now a fifth. But it's not a perfect fifth, it's down 1 from there, so it's a flat 5. So that confused me, I remember, many years ago. You know, why has that same interval got different names? But that's why, it's just where it comes within a scale. And any scale that you care to talk about is made up of intervals, which is why you need to know them. And if you really think about it, any bass line that you want to learn is just a series of notes that usually come from one key. You know, often it doesn't, but if it does, that's just a series of intervals. So if you can learn to hear those intervals and the fact that that bass line is made up of intervals that make up this one scale, then you can actually figure out bass lines quite easily. So that's another good reason that you need to know this. There's another lesson that you should watch that I did that tells you some famous tunes that are made from all these different intervals. I think it's a good way to learn them. One of them is the Chili Peppers bass line for a minor 7th. I just know that sound now because I know that bass line so well. And then you get to know things like this. If you play a root and a minor 7th, a major 6th is right next door to that minor 7th. That's the minor 7th down an octave. With a bit of experience, you learn that certain intervals make up bass lines really easily. A root, 5, minor 7th, and an octave. It's got that sound. Over minor chords, that works really well. Recognize that bass line? It's a nice, pretty, bright-sounding major 7th. So I know this lesson was a lot of talking and a lot of theory, but at the end of the day, this is all about making music and making your life easier by making it effortless to learn scales and to hear music. So that is how I would recommend that you learn the scales, the intervals, is to know the major scale and know the names of the interval within that. The shortcut to that is the 3rd note in a major scale is a major 3rd, 6th note in a major scale is a major 6th, 7th note in a major scale is a major 7th, but in the natural minor, everything I just said was minor. Okay, minor 3rd, minor 6th, minor 7th, and get to know those really well. And then when you branch out into more complicated modes, harmonic minor, melodic minor, whatever, it's still going to be made up of intervals, just different ones. You know, it might be a raised 5th, it might be a flat 5, or it might be something like that. But because you know the basic ones, you can easily convert into these slightly harder scales, but they're not harder. You will see and you will hear that they're absolutely not harder than these sort of basic ones. So if you have any questions at all that comes from anything I've said in this lesson, just leave a comment below and I'll get back to you. But I will put links to these other lessons, and do take your time with this. This is a theory concept that once you get it, it will click and you'll be able to use it all the time. So thanks very much for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel and I'll see you on the next video.